Hi guys, just a little bit of a focus here in terms of revision on liberalism as an ideology. Remember that for the Edexcel paper you need to look at three core ideologies: conservatism, liberalism, socialism, and a non-core ideology that might be feminism, nationalism, anarchism, something like that, depending on what your school or what your college does. But yeah, in terms of liberalism, if we think about liberalism as a concept, in fact all ideologies I think are worth considering in terms of four things, that was five, four things: human nature, their views on human nature, the state, their views on the state, society, and the economy. Okay, so what is liberalism? Well, liberalism is the oldest of the political ideologies studied in A Level Government Politics, and it develops over the 17th and 18th centuries as a kind of reaction against this early modern idea of the divine right of kings that was believed in by someone like Charles I, who of course was beheaded in 1649 at the conclusion of the Second English Civil War. This idea that, you know, one is born to rule. It is also a reaction against religious obedience and the kind of feudal system and the hierarchy of medieval societies, and its birth really leads us to things like, one could argue, the French Revolution and the American Revolution in the late 18th century, the late 1700s. But the father of liberalism, as he's often dubbed, is a guy called John Locke, Locke with an E. John Locke, an Englishman who lived from 1634. He lived a long life for those days, 1634 to 1704. And it's based on the new learning, I suppose, of science, of reason, and of philosophy. Now, there are various things that liberalism posited, believed in, argued. Individualism, rationalism, liberty, and so forth. Individualism. Liberals believe that individuals are supreme. In those days, really, men. It wasn't so enlightened really as to value women in perhaps the way that we do today, but there were moves in that direction. But individuals are supreme. Individuals will apply logic and reasoning to the decisions they make in life. It's a positive view of human nature in which, yes, self-interest is a prime motivator, but that individuals will obey what people like Locke argued were natural laws that temper their self-interest. In other words, it's not all just about me, me, me. It's what we call egotistical individualism. I will be kind to other people because that will make society a better place, and it will also mean they're more likely to be kind to me, which will help me in my times of need, etc. So this idea of individualism, but a logical individualism. It's quite conceptual, isn't it, all this? As a concept, liberalism also believes in what we call rationalism. Individuals will make rational decisions. They'll set their own they'll act in their own rational self-interest, but also what is rationally in the best interests of society at large. In other words, they will do things which serve society well. So a liberal take today on climate change is that, yes, we need to gradually but quickly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, not just because it helps me, because the continued presence of oxygen in the atmosphere is a good thing for me, or diminution of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a good thing for me, but also for humanity in general. Liberty. A liberal believes in the freedom to make your own choices. Society is strongest, according to liberals, when individuals are free to pursue their own goals without lots of laws and regulations and restrictions. And such freedoms exist under natural law, which it's irrational to break. So a lot of liberals today will say, oh yeah, I'm a liberal, believe in freedom, I vote Lib Dem, all this kind of thing. The Lib Dems are the modern equivalent of the Liberal Party, which used to win elections up until the First World War, really, David Lloyd George, you'll have perhaps learned about at the Treaty of Versailles, was a liberal prime minister, brought in things like pensions and old age pensions and support for people. But think about the COVID pandemic. So if I'm a liberal on that, then, you know, I should have the freedom not to wear a mask when I wander into a shop. But I suppose Locke would have said to that, were Locke alive in 2019, 2020, 2021 in the COVID pandemic, he would say, yeah, but I will make rational decisions to protect society at large. So because I am a liberal, that doesn't mean I don't care about vulnerable people, the elderly, etc. And therefore I'll wear a mask to protect others, not to protect myself. But this idea of you must stay at home during the height of the pandemic would be a very illiberal act, wouldn't it? So it gets complicated this time. The state. What do liberals believe on the state? Well, liberals believe that the government rules with the consent of the people through what they call a social contract. The consent of the people through a social contract. So in other words, the government, we give the power to the government to rule with our consent. The state should be limited by having a constitution and individual rights. State power and institutions should be separated, and the state should tolerate individualism and diversity. This is very enlightened, isn't it, for the 1700s? So if I am doing something which doesn't hurt you, then I should be free to do that thing. And therefore that's quite a liberal approach to it as well, isn't it? But again, where do you draw the line? So modern, Liberal Democrat policy, the last election, was to basically not quite legalise drugs, but to see punishment for drug taking, not drug dealing, drug taking, as a medical issue, not a criminal offence. But again, does someone taking drugs affect wider society? Well, yeah, because it creates medical issues which have to be paid for by the NHS, it adds to crime, etc. So again, these are shades of grey, these issues, they're not simple. Equality. Liberals believe that individuals are born equal and equality should exist under the rule of law. There should be equality of opportunity for everyone. They were thinking particularly men in those days, but in today's context, for everyone. And different views and behaviours are to be tolerated as individual choices. And society should be based on meritocracy. In other words, the best people should get to do high-level jobs, etc., because they're good, not because they went to Oxford or Cambridge or Eton or something like that. Now, the final point I guess to make here is that there are various strands within liberalism, and in really simple terms, because it's revision here, you get classical liberals and you get modern liberals. So a classical liberal from the 18th century believes in revolutionary potential. When a government becomes too powerful and starts infringing on individual liberties, the people are entitled, in their view, to rise up and overthrow the tyrants. Think French Revolution there, Louis XVI. But one must always respect private property. Locke notes. They believe in something called negative liberty. What that means is that everything should be legal until it's not, until a law is made. Meaning the default is, yeah, go ahead and do it, until some government comes along and says, actually, it's causing a lot of harm, we shouldn't do this. They believe in a minimal state, unlike socialism, where a state is necessary, but it should only do the bare minimum, like laws, tax, army to protect the people, that kind of thing. So they believe in laissez-faire capitalism, where there should be minimal regulation of the market. And that's really classical liberals. Modern liberals believe not in negative liberty, but positive liberty, in the sense that market forces and social conditions limit individual freedom. So individual liberty needs to be clearly protected by introducing laws to protect liberties. They believe in an enlarged state, in order to protect individuals from socio-economic threats, it's the role of the state to act through collective measures like welfare payments, etc., to keep people free and not starving to death with no money, which is clearly not freedom. They also believe, modern liberals, in constitutional reform. To enlarge the state is something that's necessary to ensure the state remains democratic. Modern liberal policies include things like voting system reform. They believe in social liberalism, actively promoting toleration by passing laws to punish those who are not tolerant of others. For example, those who are against gay rights, transgender rights, etc. As a result, we've got these two very distinct strands. Now, the liberals you need to know about for your exam, the Edexcel course. So we mentioned John Locke, the father of liberalism. Locke really believes that humans are rational, they're self-interested, but mindful of others. He believes that, as I said earlier, government rules by the consent of the governed. He believes that natural laws guide social relations, not formalised laws. And he believes that the state should respect private property and act as a neutral judge or arbiter between the two. Another classical liberal would be, that you need to know, is Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, Mary Wollstonecraft argued that men and women, radical for those days, are rational beings. She essentially was a Republican who wanted to enshrine women's rights in a republic, so abolish the monarchy, pretty radical for those days. She believed that a patriarchal society had undermined female individualism. Often Wollstonecraft's seen as an early feminist, but she's not a feminist for the purposes of this Edexcel course. She's a liberal. And she believed that women should be liberated in order to boost a free trade economy, that women having money would boost capitalism and free trade. Another key liberal you need to know about, who published a text called On Liberty, was J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill. And Mill lived 1806 to 1873, so effectively adult life Victorian. He believed that human nature was progressing to higher levels and that humans were capable of more than they had been in the past. He believed that government should be representative democracy with a respect for minority rights. He believed in a society of individuality and self-improvement. I guess a bit like America today, that, work hard and improve yourself. And he believed that the route to happiness was laissez-faire capitalism. Then there are two more modern liberals you need to know about. John Rawls, who lived from the 1920s and died in 2002. And John Rawls, that humans are selfish. And he argued that the state has a duty to assist the less fortunate, because although we're selfish, we also have empathy for others. He believed the condition of the poorest should be improved and that free market capitalism should be restricted. So little steps towards what we might traditionally associate with socialism. And the other liberal you need to know about, who again, a lot of politics teachers would say, well, she's a feminist, one of the most famous feminists actually, but she's on this course seen as a liberal, needs to be used in questions on liberalism in the exam, is Betty Friedan, the American. Now, Betty Friedan died in 2006 and lived through most of the 20th century. She argued that human nature discourages self-advancement for women. And when you get into her writing, a lot of it is the argument that women maybe are conditioned by society to be less ambitious, or maybe that's harsh, but less ambitious because they are seen, they are taught from being little girls to be maybe more demure and take more of a backseat and be less out there than boys and men. And that therefore the state has a duty to prevent discrimination against women, because society is inherently chauvinistic, and women are complicit in this, argues Friedan. That they are maybe more judgmental of each other than even men are of them. And she argues that an economy should be anti-discrimination, should have plenty of anti-discrimination legislation, which would boost the free market. So anyway, I hope that's useful. A little sort of heads up on liberalism from the perspective of the exam there. Thanks.